I think in the long run, the value that Nelson Mandela added to South Africa is beyond the immediate. It's about his image, it's about the peaceful nation that we've become slowly, it's about the tolerance that often is in South Africa, not always as well as we want to, and the fact that we have peace. I mean, peace in itself in South Africa has added hugely to the economic successes that we've had in this country, and it's enabled us to do things like present the Soccer World Cup, to present the Cricket World Cup, or the World Conference on Sustainability or Racism. It's also helped us grow our normal factories and things like that. Unfortunately, some of that legacy is now under threat with some new renewed labor strife that came to an end during his presidency. But it certainly shows that Nelson Mandela has meant a lot for the South African economy. In the last year or two, politics have changed and the economy hasn't grown as much as we wanted to. I think the big thing in South Africa is that growth has not translated into jobs. Part of that is the problem that we have is the inequality. Only 4 out of 10 South African adults have a job. The other problem is that only 1 in 4 adults is part of the formal sector. So let's call that the rich part of South Africa. And the rest don't feel that rich. They feel they haven't had this economic success. So the minority of people, and not based on race, have had really good success out of it, and they don't always believe it, but they've had relative success out of our transition to democracy. The problem is that democracy has created very few jobs, and population growth has been higher than job growth. And that means that ever more people are on the unemployment line. And so while we have 25% unemployment, that is actually a manipulative figure with definitions changing. The big issue is we've gone from 20 years ago, nearly 5 out of 10 South Africans having a job during a period of sanctions, to where we have 4 out of 10 South Africans having a job, getting paid better for that job, but it's not translating into jobs for other people at the moment. The problem with black economic empowerment is it's benefited very few. And actually some of the trusts where Nelson Mandela and some of the older ANC leaders have benefited more people probably than some of the newer ones, which were supposed to benefit even more people, because those were considered to be too narrow. And now we find that with 1 or 2 exceptions, black economic empowerment is benefiting still fewer people. And that's part of the problem of inequality then in South Africa. So black economic empowerment was also hindered our performance because as an investment destination, because companies have seen it as an extra tax. And that's unfortunate, but in a sense it's true. And they don't know if it does buy them that sort of peace, especially after the labor unrest that we've seen in the last 18 months in South Africa, where people said, but I've bought this black economic empowerment, should it not have bought me a lot more workplace peace? And again, going back to Nelson Mandela's time, where there were fewer BEE transactions in the making, and then towards the end of his presidency, quite a lot. But they got ever narrower, and they included ever more the same people. So what you found is the one person that was part of one transaction became part of another transaction, and so forth over the next decade. And this is making government rethink, this is making business rethink. And on the other hand, what is also making people rethink is let's say a normal company or so-called white-owned company will give away part of its shares to a black entrepreneur who then 5 years later sells his shares to another white person, and then the company has to start everything from scratch. And these are the type of situations that we have to look at, because it means that one person got rich, decided not to do anything more with it, and now we go through the whole process again. not all the money was spent efficiently. Our problem is that government did not spend the money. The money they got for land reform, even at today's prices, should have allowed them to complete 50% of the transactions. They're nowhere near to 25% of the transactions that they wanted to complete. And then on top of that, there was no support for many of the new black farmers coming through, whereas we've seen black farmers that are commercial anyway be quite successful. And people forget that part very easily because they see the failure of the prime examples, and they forget the people that wanted to go into farming, that made their own plans, who are often much more successful. And yes, land reform in many ways hasn't been successful, but if you look at South African home ownership, for example, African home ownership is on par, if not more, in value terms than white home ownership, although whites are fewer. But we also see then Indians and coloureds have also made great strides in home ownership. And today, because of the way things have worked out, there are more Africans with second homes than there are whites with second homes, by far. 1 in 3 African families have a second home, typically in an old homeland area, but it's somewhere where they go away to over holiday periods. So whilst we look at all this, you know, if one looks at land reform as a very emotive issue and it's on agriculture and it's held agriculture back, what people forgot is that a lot of the housing questions are not doing quite as badly, and every census that we've had, every household survey that we've had has shown a very high home ownership, in fact higher than most of Europe by far. And in such a way you can call us a capitalist nation, although when you talk to our politicians you would swear we're just slightly left to the communists. I think it'll be a period of a lot of mourning. I think it'll be a very tragic period for South Africa. We'll probably see a national holiday or so being declared, which will have a productivity impact and economically speaking perhaps. But at the other end, I think we're going to see a little bit of a benefit in the next year or two, not just from the merchandising, but from the amount of people that would want to come and visit South Africa, from the amount of people that are going to be reminded about his status and what he did for our country, and perhaps other parts of the world, because our sort of peace process has helped the Northern Ireland peace process and other areas as well, Darfur and so on, where South Africans are involved in. Not all of them equally successful. And I think in that sort of sense, you know, we may see very much a little bit of a pickup in tourism again, people wanting to come and visit maybe his gravesite, people wanting to come and visit Robben Island and places where he stayed, Vulokazi Street in Soweto or in Houghton maybe, and maybe want to tour places you know, with historic significance. And I think we mustn't underestimate that.